Welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scaleups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. This week's guest is Josh Davis. I think you're going to enjoy speaking with him as much as I have in the past. Josh is an exited founder, experienced business person, and someone who's building a collection of companies. So someone I think that we can ask a lot of questions to. Josh, that was kind of brief. Could you maybe do a little bit better intro for yourself than I did?
Yeah, sure. I've been fortunate enough. I've been in multi-industry. I've basically been in acquisitions since I was in my early 20s. Kind of got lots of bumps and bruises along the way. Had some things that didn't go as planned, and so it was basically kind of 10 years of hard knocks and learning lessons, and then eventually I kind of got my own system and married my wife, who became my business partner and kind of my better half, and brought a different skill set to our business. And then we kind of took off from there. So we did a bit of a roll-up strategy together, did some acquisitions, built some technology, scaled it up, and exited within 3 years of founding it. We sold it to a private equity-backed firm. And yeah, since then, just kind of, I did a 2-year transition with them, was CEO for 2 years, and then I stepped down. And then since then, we've set up a family office. So we're continuing to do acquisitions for businesses that fit our vision and values and work well within our portfolio. And then we have a consulting division as well, where we help people with people strategy, recruiting, technology, systems, and basically helping them build their businesses to scale, to either hold or to exit. So that's kind of the quick intro.
Wow, that's a lot. So you mentioned acquisition several times.
Yeah.
I've only exited once, and that was an experience, that's for certain.
Yeah.
I know when we were getting ready to sell, it was quite a process. Do you find that the preparation for selling impacts? Let me rephrase that. Would you say that being prepared for a sale impacts the likelihood of acquisition? What an exit would look like for that founder?
100%. So, I've learned, I've had a few exits, and I had one significant one. And then our consulting division, we're helping businesses put in the right systems and people and strategy to prepare to exit. I always tell people, no matter what, when you're building a business, always build it like you're going to sell, because if you do it right, you might never want to. So that's one thing that I think is really important, is making sure you don't want to be in a position where you need to sell or you really want to sell. And there's some simple things you can do to get it ready to sell. And the first, always got to focus is on the people. You got to make sure you have the right people in the right seats, the right leadership team, making sure that the business doesn't rely so heavily on the founder. So that's the kind of the first step. If you're looking to sell, make sure that you get the right people in the right place, you're delegating, and you're putting the right systems so that the business can run and grow without you. Because that's the one thing, even with us looking to acquire businesses, we're always looking, how dependent is this business on the founder? And so that's the big thing I always, for our own businesses and even people we're consulting with, get your team in place, because that's what the buyers are going to look at. The second, always systems, especially now, Jerry, I mean, with technology and AI and, having all your tight systems and everything together, and making sure there's as much automation as possible and as much visibility on your metrics and your KPI is really important as well. And so, anyone who's looking to sell, those are the two things that always got to focus on: the people and the systems.
You said a lot there, so I'm going to dial back to the beginning and hit on a couple of points. The first one, so when we started Apicero, we built it to sell. We knew that we wanted to get out. We were building it for a payday. And we knew we wanted to try to get that done in 5 years. So every choice we made served that master. And I think that that's an important thing that a lot of founders overlook. I'm not saying to plan for an exit in 5 years. It's the plan where you want to be in 5 years.
Yes.
It might be that you're building an entity that you want to pass down to your children. It might be you're building yourself a solopreneur job that know its destiny is to turn the lights out when you're done because it's not really saleable. It might be
Yeah.
that you want to exit, but know what that is so you can make decisions that support that.
Totally agree.
The second thing you mentioned was systems. Another common error that I see is that the founder slash CEO stays too heavily involved in everything. Then when it
Yes.
comes time to sell, the buyer says, well, without you, what do we have? And their best cases, they'll be with the new entity for at least 3 to 5 years. Their
Yeah,
worst cases, there's no interest, or if there is, it's a greatly reduced price where they're just buying the client list or something like that.
exactly. Yeah, I would say like that's a big thing. Like when people are looking to acquire your business, they're going to be very concerned about how much the founder CEO is involved in the sales, the account management, the systems, all that stuff. If he's the kind of key leader that's constantly, doing the firefighting and the leadership development, it's going to be a definite flag in the due diligence checklist. And so if you're building it, like you said, if you're building something to sell in 5 years, whether you want to sell it in 5 years or not, if you really want to scale, and my wife and I, we ran up to that, our first business, we got it up to 10 million. Then we started to, hit a ceiling, and we realized, too much of this business was dependent on each of us in our specific roles. How do we go to that next level? And for us, it was, I keep talking about this. We focus on two things: getting more of the right people in the right seats, focusing on A players, people that fit well into our culture. And then the second was my wife, which I was totally against, Jerry. She wanted to build our own in-house software to be able to streamline operations, to be able to get our visibility, the metrics, all the stuff that I wanted to be able to run the business. And so I was originally against it just because, back then, it was quite costly to get, programmers, and there wasn't all this AI that could help assist with that. And so, yeah, eventually, once we actually built it and I saw the power of having, a system that can talk to different entities, to your financial system, to your CRM, your operating system, and getting those real-time, scoreboards and metrics, it was a total game changer for us. So for me personally, I saw the power of getting out of the weeds, getting out of all of those, big decisions and the big sales meet. Like I'd still be involved to a certain level, but as much as possible, putting the right people in the right seats, the right system, and then allowing them to grow and scale the business. And then I started more focusing on the leadership and the strategy, and that really helped us take off.
I could gleefully talk to you about that particular topic for about 3 hours. But in deference to keeping us on point with preparing our company to sell, let me go as far as saying I completely agree. One thing that owners need to understand, though, is not to put the needle too far the other way. You don't start at that point. In the beginning of your startup, you do everything. That is the nature of startups.
Yeah.
The point is to grow out of that so that ultimately when you're close to sale time, you're something of an internal consultant. You can focus on the biggest fire, the biggest problem, the biggest opportunity, but you're not tied to anything because the thing you're tied to is the thing that's going to scare the buyer.
And yeah, I would just echo that. Even though people see kind of what we're doing now and the level that we're scaling at, it was 10 years of grit and hard work and sleepless nights and doing everything. Like, you got to do what you got to do to crack that, first stage, the 1 million and above. You got to kind of all hands on deck. But yeah, once you get to a certain point, if you want to go to that next level and exit, you got to implement some of the things that we're talking.
Yeah, honestly, if you want to go to the next level, period, full stop, you have to implement at least some of the things we're talking about. Because there will come a point where you go from being the hero that drove the ship to the bottleneck no one can get things through.
100%. Yeah.
So what other advice would you share with companies that are preparing to sell, that are looking for that exit, maybe either near 3.5 or 4, they're implementing some of these strategies? What things should they be looking for to do?
Yeah. So aside from the people and systems, those are obviously in my opinion, the most important. I think the next one that I've been seeing even in deals that we've been doing recently is getting your financials in order. So making sure that, you're doing the proper bookkeeping, things are up to date, you've got some visibility and some metrics, because as a buyer that's going to come in and purchase the business, they're going to want to understand what is the growth potential, where is it at today, where do you see it going. And if I find if you're not really clear on, books aren't up to date, you don't have clear measurements, and things are a little bit messy, that's the first part that ends up scaring a potential buyer, and not feeling maybe the numbers are as accurate, or you're doing accruals properly, and all that stuff. So I think another like really important thing is get your financials tight, make sure you're updating them monthly, make sure you have clear KPIs and scorecards. And as the buyer comes in, they just make, for me now, as being more on the acquisition side, I love it when the owner can be really, the financials are clear, they can explain it, there's no hidden things or different accrual. One year they did it this way, the next year they do it that way. And I mean, in the last year, deals that we've had to walk away from, unfortunately, good businesses, good customer base, had some key people, but when we started digging into the financials, it just wasn't representing a true picture of what the normalized EBITDA was. And unfortunately, it can kill deals if your financials are messy.
I'll share a little bit of a related horror story.
Right.
The family of companies that I grew out of, and that some of my investor friends and startup founders grew out of, what we would do is we had a company that was essentially a cash cow. It was a technology staffing firm, made lots of money, had a solid back office. So we would just grow out of that almost like we're an informal division that has a DBA to another name. Then when the company started to get its sea legs under it, we start formalizing, cutting ties until we're fully separate. But it made for some muddy waters for this first couple of years, because we were sharing personnel, sharing bank accounts, everything. We would use the same credit card for, both things, because even after we separated, we all had ties to other companies.
Yes.
So that did us no favors at the end.
Yeah.
It was not a blessing for our acquirer.
Totally. And actually in one of our deals as well, same sort of thing, Jerry. We had multiple partners. We had a real estate play tied in with it, and, different guarantees, cross guarantees, and operating businesses out of it. And it was really messy. And it probably took us about a year before we could even get ready for that exit, because we had to clean all that stuff up. And especially when you're got cross guarantees with banks and real estate and stuff like that, you want to make sure you get a clear runway so the business is ready to sell to the new buyer, especially if you're not selling some of those cross real estate or whatever you got going.
At what point would you recommend that companies start thinking about involving a CFO in a non-fractional way, if at all? I mean, for smaller companies.
Yeah, I mean, for us, once we got to that 10 million mark, we felt like we needed more than our external accounting firm or someone supporting us on a fractional side, or our in-house controller. For us personally, because we wanted to continue scale to the 9 figures. So once we got up to the 10, we felt it was important to have that in-house CFO, someone who was controlling it, someone who was really owning that part of the business, because especially as you're growing and scaling, and depending on what type of business you are, but the business we've been involved in, a lot of capital, a lot of, reinvesting money, we're doing acquisitions. I really wanted to know that we had people on or someone on our team that owned that division and could get us the answers and help direct and give that clarity when we're making decisions. So yeah, for us, it was around the 10 million.
And do you think that's a fair yardstick, or is that more specific to your own circumstances?
That specifically was to my personal circumstance, and we had significant goals to get beyond that. But I recommend once you get to the certain level, obviously you got to look at what it costs to bring in a CFO. And obviously if you bring in a strong one, it's going to be a substantial cost. But if you have aggressive growth plans and you want to keep scaling, I mean, you got to do the math and make sure it justifies having the cost of that in-house person. And for us, it was about making sure that we were making wise decisions for growing and scaling and doing acquisitions. So yeah, for me personally, it was a no-brainer.
I think that's excellent advice. I think that plays back to the people part. Again, now for me, I don't know if it's because I grew up predominantly in sales and CFOs are the natural enemy of salespeople. But I've always struggled with the finance side. Once our finances get much more complicated than a spreadsheet, it pretty much starts to look like Latin to me. So that was an important
Totally.
investment on our part.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd say, Jerry, we were the same, especially at the beginning. Like once we got up to the 10 plus, we were just focused on doing whatever it takes to grow and scale and sales and, building our sales teams. And like we were on the road quite a bit across North America. And that was really our focus. And then once it got to to the 10 and then we wanted to go further, we needed someone that was going to give us some clear advice on the financials, clean that up, make sure, even simpler stuff like the invoicing, making sure you have the right systems, making sure that's streamlined, AR, all that stuff, as well as, the financial planning, cash flow management, all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, up to the first 10, it was kind of like we talked about. It's all hands on deck. Revenue will solve most problems. Let's just keep going. And then, once you get to a certain level, a little bit more sophistication. And I even learned even more about how important that is once we exited to, private equity backed firm. There's reporting and some of it can be a little bit overkill in my personal opinion, being entrepreneurial, like to move quickly, but I did learn how important it is to make sure that all the numbers are in check, the cash balances, the cash flow planning, all that stuff. So I definitely learned a lot from that and have implemented some of that stuff going forward. And but at the very beginning, it's just revenue is going to solve most problems. So let's keep bringing in the sales and we'll figure it out.
I think you and I would be a problem with that mentality, and I'll explain why. So I have a good friend who thrives in chaos. He's very good under pressure, to the point that unfortunately he's a horrible planner because he's exceptional in chaos. When something goes wrong, he can figure it out, so he just doesn't trouble himself. And what you said that scares me a little bit is I've got the very bad attitude of there are a few things I can screw up so badly that I can't sell my way out.
Yes.
It's hobbled me a couple of times because I'll make an actively bad choice. I'm like, just go make a couple more sales. We'll figure it out. The money will be there. And it's and I don't say that, I said that somewhat tongue in cheek, that would be a bad match of that, because revenue solves all problems. But to your point on systems, not having them in place creates unnecessary ones.
100%, Jerry. And that's where I'd say my old mentality, like in my 20s, it was just kind of sales, keep going, we'll figure it out. And just like you said, that's how I made mistakes and challenges, didn't have the right people in the right seats, didn't have the right systems. And then fortunately, I married I dropped out of university. I was going to business school. My grandfather got cancer. I left to take care of him. That's another long story. But then my wife, on the other hand, graduated in one of the top universities, a business degree, very systems minded. And so once I married her, my kind of, people skills, competitive sales, all that stuff, combined with her, systems and processes and thinking more in the present as opposed to the future. Once we kind of combine that, that's when we really started to make some headway, and we've had quite a bit of success. But I needed that balance to that kind of what you were talking about. Like it can be a little bit chaotic and just keep go and bring in more revenue, but that only gets to a certain point. You don't have the systems to sustain that revenue. You're going to run into some challenges. So I'd say I was one of the guys who had to learn it the hard way.
Yeah, that creates its own ceiling for certain, because there's only so much hustle one person can hustle.
Yeah.
Before they're just making errors. And I want to stick with that systems and people theme. One of the things I think that's also important for people to understand as they're building their teams is that some people thrive at certain stages or sizes of a business.
Yes.
So some folks, for example, are startup small business people. When you put them in a large enterprise level organization, the amount of structure, it just doesn't work for them. Doesn't make them bad candidates, doesn't make that a bad culture, just makes it a bad match, which in related news has been a theme in my career. There are far fewer bad candidates and bad companies than there are bad matches. And that's an important distinction. And And somewhat ironically, and this one might be a more specialized problem, Pacero had gotten up to 2,500 people with 9 offices in 3 countries, sold it.
Wow.
So it was a pretty
Wow.
big org, you know?
Yes.
So we sold that, drifted around for a couple months, started Redbeard with just me to start and a
Yes.
decent little nest egg. So once we started to grow, I made the classic blunder, which was still thinking I had a big company, still thinking
Yes.
like a more mature organization. And
Yes.
ultimately, I wound up hiring an exceptional person who's the wrong for the stage company we're at. And
Got it.
thankfully, the relationship survived, but it was just a bad match. She was dramatically more expensive than our company
Yeah.
could afford at the time. Growth was slower than we expected, so our run
Yeah.
rate was terrifying. It was like we poured napalm on the runway. And from an internal perspective, he's a great guy. He's exceptional, truly, but he's a big company guy. And we
Yeah.
were not that. So we just burned, gosh, like $85,000, I think is what it wound up. And
Wow.
I might as well have taken that in the backyard and lit it on fire. Everything about it was a loss. So
Yeah.
the only good thing is that the relationship survived, and we're still friends and in the future. But I say this to say it's critical to understand that the people you hire, the size and maturity of your company is hyper relevant.
Totally, Jerry. I mean, there's so many things I can tell you about how I understand that as well. Like even me, building, scaling, selling to private equity back, working with them for a couple of years, then going back into small business acquisitions. I ran into a couple of similar situations as that. And one thing that I kind of took a step back and reflected on, even at the different stages of our one entity that we scaled and we grew, the people that we had from 0 to 1 million started to change from that 1 to 10 and then 10 to 20, 50. And it was different stages. I noticed with people that some people thrived in that like early chaos, bring in the revenue, figure it out. Then once you get to a certain level and you got to have technology and systems and actually following the process and the technology that we set up, some people didn't fit into that. They liked more of the fly by the seat of your pants and just do deals and things like that. And so I just realized at certain stages of your growth, especially on your like leadership team, if people don't continue to level up their skills and their leadership abilities and opening their eyes to what it takes to go to that next stage, yeah, sometimes it's just not the right fit to continue on, or you've got to kind of upskill them, you got to get them some training, but it's really up to that person. Do you want to go to that next level? Because that next level usually requires more systems, more processes, bringing on some more of the right people. And yeah, so I've lived both sides, and I've made some mistakes through that. And I just realized it's just really important to make sure, just like you said, what stage you're at, where you're going to be in a year and 5 years from now, and then start trying to implement and make sure the people that you're hiring be thinking about that, not just about where you're at today, is really important.
100% agree. Now, we've covered a lot of topics in service of, preparing your company to sell. If you could give one piece of advice to any startup founder, Josh, what do you think that would be?
Oh, that's a tough one. One piece of advice to any startup founder. Actually, I was going to go a different way, but I'm going to say this. I think any startup founder, if you want to build and scale something that is going to last, I think it's very, very important that the founder continues to develop your leadership skills. I think it's really important to, if you want to build a business, you really got to, and I could tell you stories about how I learned this the hard way, but it's really important to be the best leader you can be, because ultimately, if you want to attract the right people in the right seats and A players, typically they want to be around the right leadership team, the right people that can, set a vision, clear expectations, but also empower them to thrive in their roles, and also empower them to make sure that they're meeting their goals, understanding what their goals are. And so that was one thing I think for my first 10 years, I just was really tried to lead by example and take the bull by the horns. And it got me some success, but what really helped me, go to the next level was really developing my leadership skills and realizing that if I didn't develop my leadership skills, I would be the ceiling of the business. And I was at a certain point. And then once I learned to develop more leadership skills, getting mentors and taking, going to different conferences and get leaders that are way further along than me and getting around them, seeing how they operated. That was a total game changer for me. And then I was able to actually go out and attract the right people to work in my organization. And if you put the right people in the seats, they will help you grow the business. So yeah, I think that's one thing. Don't forget about developing your leadership skills as you're building and scaling the business.
I think that's a great one. One of the better ones that I've heard. This probably won't surprise you based on what you just said, but prior to Redbeard and Apicero, I worked as a leadership coach and a management consultant in technology services companies. I worked with over 75 different companies in literally every single one of them. However the problem manifested, its source was a leadership problem, literally every single time.
Yeah.
No organization grows past the level of its leader. They are the ceiling. And to your 100%. Point, if they don't elevate their game, the ceiling never increases.
Yeah.
I could not agree with you anymore. I'd love to have you back on sometime and talk just about leadership.
Totally. I love that, Jerry.
There are two topics that I think are critically important that people talk about a lot, but don't actually execute on. Leadership is one of them, and culture is the other. Yep. Everyone rolls their eyes a little bit when you start talking about culture. And I get it because everybody talks about it. But if you don't actually do any of the things, it's like trying to lose weight inside of a bakery. You're not going to succeed.
Totally. I'd say that was, for me, was really the wake up call in the one business that we really, we scaled quite significantly was and I think it was in the book, Good to Great, but basically it's if you can have the, best strategy in the world, the best opportunity, for acquisition and scale, but if you don't have the right people and culture and leadership, I mean, it's very difficult to meet those goals. And so that was one thing that I learned early on. It's all about the people, all about the leadership, all about the culture. If you really want to have an impact and scale something meaningful, not just for you, but for your team and create jobs and, compete in the market. Yeah, you got to have the right culture.
This feels like another episode. I'm going to cut tape here because I don't want to run too long. It was awesome having you on the show, Josh. And I would love to talk about that. But you've shared a lot of great information. If people want to learn more about you and what you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So people can find me on LinkedIn at Scaling with Josh Davis. So you can find me on there. I share content about ups and downs of business and acquisitions. And then on our consulting page, it's our family office, but we do consulting as well. You can go to J as in L, Josh and Loretta, my wife. So jldavisenterprises.com. We got a bunch of free resources on there. And if anyone wants to connect and looking for some help to scale your business, we're always looking to help good people that want to have an impact.
That's awesome. And for new listeners, please don't crash your cars trying to write that down. All those links will be in the show notes. So either go over to our YouTube channel or wherever it is that you listen. It'll be on the show page in the notes. Josh, again, thanks very much for being on the show. And that wasn't a hollow offer. I'd love to talk to you again about leadership or culture.
Love it. Anytime, Jerry. That sounds great.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
Thanks.